I would have to say that one of the biggest mysteries in Black Clover is why and how Zagred was able to leave the Underworld. We know that devils cannot just freely leave. They have to find a way, a special way out, usually through human means. Today, we'll be discussing a theory about the Seabed Temple and how they secretly been worshipping Zagred. And were they the modality of how Zagred came from the Underworld to the physical human world? So, please stay tuned, guys, because this is a theory with a lot of evidence. And if you watch to the end, I think you will be really surprised at how crazy this makes the Seabed Temple look, that they could be worshipping Zagred without even knowing it. If you guys want to help out this channel, please check out my light novel series called 9 Fates at 9fates.com. You can also subscribe, like, turn notifications. With that being said, let's get into this video. So, I'm not alone today. Today I'm doing this theory with Jack Oates. And Jack Oates, please reintroduce yourself to the channel.
Yo, what's up everyone? It's your boy Jack Oates. You either know or you don't. Here collabing with the one and only Broku, formerly known as Broku No Hero. I keep wanting to say that just off the bat, but
which, by the way, you do have a sub goal. I believe, was it 3.5k?
Yeah, 3.5k by the end of November. Super high goal, but I'm pretty sure we can do it. The fan base is pretty awesome.
So if you guys have not subscribed, I definitely think you should. I've been subscribed for a while now, but puts out really, really good theories. Very well researched. You just bought like what, over $1,000 worth of books of like demonology and stuff.
Yeah, just about. Yeah, occult and all that good stuff. It's been an interesting read, but yeah, definitely put a lot of time and effort into the theories to make sure that they're well backed and we're not just saying anything, you know.
I think the really part 2 of this theory was what I came up with, and then part 1 is when you hit me up this week about it. So I think you should bring up the first point, which kind of blew my mind.
Let's see, what was the first point? Was it the
The first point is that the Seabed Temple god, the sea god, uses a trident, which is what Zagred uses as well.
Yeah, I just found it to be like a very specific weapon of choice, you know. You're in the midst of battle with two who are the strongest beings in existence, especially at their time. And then you come up, you know, with this anti-magic kid and his wind friend, and you whip out a trident that happens to break down the magic that it makes contact with. Very specific weapon and specific ability on top of that. So, I mean, the only other place we saw a trident was, of course, in the Seabed Temple. In that whole arc, we had the sea god statue holding its trident there. So, I guess that's kind of where the connection started, and then we just ended up finding like more and more things to keep this snowball growing.
Yeah, there's actually a lot, and it's super interesting and kind of mind-blowing. Just one of the things is that Lucifero, one of his spells, I believe it's called Evil God's Pressure Craft. So that's basically essentially him implying that he is an evil god, which means he is a god, and which would mean that devils, at least probably high-ranking ones, would be gods. And then there's the sea god, which is one of the few gods that we've like ever officially even seen in some sort of capacity as, like, even though it's just a statue. But we see the people who worship it, and the fact that he has a trident and Zagred has a trident, it coincides pretty well together.
It does. And the masks were actually interesting because, like, going back and reading the Seabed Temple arc and seeing the mages that he has fight the Black Bulls, they have the black markings. They're on all of the masks. However, they're not so much prevalent on the masks of the mages that aren't Kahono and her family. I noticed that their father, Geo, has a hammerhead shark mask, but he's got these 3 squiggle marks leading up to his mouth, and they're exactly like Zagred's. There's almost no difference. And then Kahono and Kyato's masks have the same squiggle marks, but they're around the eyes instead of the mouth, which Zagred does have as well. So I thought it was just, you know, something small in detail, but we know how Tabata gets with those small details, you know?
Yeah, and so, like, just kind of snowballing from there is that it's either the sea god, what we think is Zagred used his word soul magic to transform himself into that. We've seen him use other magic types by using his words, or we think that he could have possessed somebody, or may even been contracted with somebody. Because when like devil hosts use their devil power, they get these markings on their face, and these markings just look so much like the devil markings from devil hosts, or when devils have them. So it could be that, like you have mentioned, that whenever this host or if Zagred used the devil power, those markings appear on the sea god's face, and these people see that, and then they make these masks as like a way to honor and worship that. It's crazy because that mask from Geo, which is signifying he is the strongest mage in the entire temple, uses the mask that has the same exact markings as Zagred.
Yep. Like we were talking about earlier, I like the idea of the sea god that they worship having possibly contracted with Zagred, because Dorothy does point out later on to Noelle that devils aren't in the physical world or can't come to it without an oddity happening, some kind of summoning. So I feel like it does make sense that this untouched group of people that are separated from civilization on land for so long could have been easily manipulated into worshiping a person who is contracted with a devil. It's just this lack of information they must be getting, because the only people that we've seen go from the Seabed temple to civilization is Kahono and Kyoto. And if you aren't of relevant power, you're just not getting out of there. That's just where you're stuck.
And then a huge point that you noticed is that when the Black Bulls first show up, the citizens of the temple were like, what did they say? Come back later if you survive or whatever. So like,
yeah,
it almost seems like people who come here, they have to play this game, and it's almost like a ritual. And this is not unlike other cultures. I know it was like the sport that eventually evolved into soccer, and that was like where people actually died in that game, and that was a form of a ritual to honor their gods. So it could be almost like this is like a ritualistic thing to honor their god, which might be Zagred. I mean, it's a temple. They're doing it all in a temple too.
Right. So the whole thing is just like this like pseudo religion base. And I like that you pointed out, like, I think you're referring to like Aztec gods or how they would play that game. And we kind of talked about this point too, where this is what kind of separates some of those Klibotic devils and the angels on the Sephiroth, where a lot of those devils in the Klibot used to be Canaanite gods, some of the first gods, before some of the more Christian ones started coming into play. And the main difference is that the Klibotic gods required sacrifices. Like our big bad Moloch in the Thamael required sacrifices of children by fire. These guys are hugely different than a god that you would just need to pray to and just acknowledge that they're there, you know what I mean? So them saying that, they wanted the Black Wolves to share their stories if they come back out, to me, definitely raised a flag. Like, they've definitely had visitors before, and some of those visitors didn't come back out. And that might have been due to sacrificing them to their god through this game.
Yeah. And then speaking of Kyoto and Kahona again, is they both might be using dregs of power from Zagred. Because Kahona's magic, it almost seems like a genetic offshoot of Word Soul magic. She has song magic. She uses like words, but in a different way to use magic and create spells. And it does seem like maybe if either was Zagred or it was a devil host using Zagred, because we don't know how like reproduction works with a devil host and a non-devil host, but maybe they would get not just like the magic type from the parents, but also maybe from the devil, because that devil is kind of part of that. So maybe Zagred's presence, his actual magic type, is into the genetic code now of the Seabed Temple people, and that's why Kahona has the song magic.
Right. And then there's also that small panel where Kyoto is telling Asta that through song and dance they would weave that magic into their life. So even if it's not genetic, I'm curious to see if, some type of maybe loose contract kind of aided their magic to form in this sort of way. part of the relationship between human and God, pseudo-God in this case, is usually a give and take, especially with these sacrificial gods. You give a sacrifice and then they would expect something in return. So it could even go along a route like that, possibly.
Yeah. And also with Kyoto is he uses these treasure swords. So they're physical swords, and they were able to stand up against Demon Slayer and Demon Dweller swords, wielded by Asta and powered by anti-magic, and they stood strong and they stood pretty durable. And we know that Zagred can create physical, like actual, real physical constructs with his word magic. He did this against Asta in the fight, and that's why it was so hard for Asta to destroy that trident, because it was made physically. And then maybe these swords are also physical ones that were created by Zagred. And it'd be almost like Kahona and Kyoto, as brother and sister, are showing the different aspects through like the symbolism of she is using the magical part, which is like the song magic, and he's using the physical part, which is the swords.
Right. And I feel like those are maybe some of the only weapons that stood up against Asta successfully.
Yeah.
Which does make sense with the trident, like you were just saying.
Yeah, because like maybe Yami's katana could, but that's probably pretty specially made, but these swords weren't even close to cracking against Asta.
Right. Exactly. I feel like we're definitely onto something, especially with those weapons, and that is something that did strike me out as odd when he referred to them as treasure swords. A katana, we have Demon Slayer, Demon Destroyer, but just to refer to it as a treasure sword, I think is just something to make note of, at least. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And to go from there as well, in the anime canon, between the time skip, the characters go back to the Seabed Temple. I know a lot of people probably missed this just because it is anime canon, and if you're manga only reader, then you're not going to see it. But we see these fish monsters that are created by the seemingly malicious mana of the Guardian, and he creates these warriors that look demonic, and they use tridents as well. And it might be that the Guardian was created or brought by Zagred. It's the negative mana that was powering this, and also from Zagred's power. And then we see a Kraken as well, which a Kraken is a Jotun in Norse mythology, which would be a mythic parallel to a demon or a devil.
Right. I think because I am one of those manga-only people. So when I watched that episode, when you pointed it out, I thought that was really interesting. And one of those points when we were talking was that place where the Protector was living, they called it some type of void, and it was just pitch black hole where it lived. And it kind of just made me think, along with this Zagred theory, that it's possible that, because you brought up the point actually, that he could have brought the beast out himself, kind of like he does when he manifests anything that he speaks into existence. I was wondering if that had, some correlation, because it does seem that Zagred pulls these creations of his out of a type of void. Speaking strictly lore, especially Jewish lore, is any type of void is the birthplace for creation itself. So it would be the perfect place to create your easel if you're painting, So I do think there's a lot of connections to Zagred, and those fish, if I'm not mistaken, as well had those markings as like we saw in the masks, and they were even using tridents.
Yeah.
And it just seems like there's too many coincidences here that are, Zagred is somehow messing with these people.
Yeah, and this leads to, I think, the final point. Let's see if you have anything more. Actually, yeah, we'll probably be one more point after this one, but that is that the Magic Stone was here, and this Magic Stone has trident symbolism on it, and we know that Zagred used the Magic Stones right before he essentially lost to Sekre and Lumiere. And then the Eye of Midnight Sun know that the Magic Stone is in the Seabed Temple, which might be because Zagred is maybe influencing them to know that.
Yeah, it seems that it's just one of those questions that just as like first read-through readers don't really think about. Is like there are instances where we should be asking, how did they know the Magic Stone was there to begin with? So Zagred's influence, I feel like, was foreshadowed in that way. But of course, not knowing the full story, we didn't quite know how severe that hold was. And one of the bigger things that I talked about on my channel, this was stemming off of some lore having to do with Yuno and his amulet, or not the amulet, but magic stone. His specific stone was massively important to the Elf Arc in the way that it was connected to a Saphira called Dot. It's not actually laid out in the Shadow Palace until Mimosa makes a map of the entire thing, and you can see it's right below the highest point where it should be. Dot, for those of you that aren't familiar, is just this abyss in occult lore. A mage would strive to get to this point, and what happens here is that they essentially go through a next level death / rebirth. This is the death of everything they know and any attachment they've ever had. And to get to the other side, this means that they awaken the third eye and meet Lucifer, but before him, they would have to meet Lucifuge and Samael or Beelzebub, depending on what clipotic lore you're going off of. But what makes Dot so important is that before there was any tree of death, it was just the tree of life that we had. And when Lucifer went rogue, his fall created this void within the tree. So the tree ends up flipping itself inside out, if you will, creating this new tree out of the void directly below it in its reflection. Upon his fall, Tyrodal lore, which is closely linked with Argentinian lore, is that Lucifer ends up losing a gem off of his crown, and this gem ends up becoming what scientists and philosophers later on called the Philosopher's Stone. This Philosopher's Stone that Lucifer had ends up becoming the Holy Grail as well, and mixing it with the blood of Jesus bestowed ultimate power upon whoever wielded it and drank from it. So there's a lot of interesting lore behind that, but I bring that up because this whole Seabed temple is left with people that don't have contact to the outside world, who could be easily influenced by anything or anyone that comes in that has a lot of power, and can be looked at them as a sort of god that can traverse between the depths of the ocean and the highest of the land. Back to the lore, they closely, almost intimately relate Lucifer with Atlantis as being the ruler of it. And there's a lot more to that lore about how they try to go to war with what are called Hyperborean people, I guess. And that just stems all the way back to Yuno and that whole thing. This stone and Zagred being there, I feel like it all has to do with this huge scheme that Zagred has been pulling off. And it's not as simple as Zagred just wanting to get out of the Underworld, for sure.
No, yeah, and that leads us to the final point that kind of brings us into part 2, which will probably be next week, maybe 2 weeks, depending on how fleshed out we can get it in that time. But Noelle, her power paired to the sea god, and they call her the sea goddess. And if the sea god was demonic, using devil power, then that might mean that Noelle is as well. And in that episode, we get some sort of evidence that maybe Asir had went to this temple because of that song, reminded her of her mother, and that Guardian played that song. So this might be pretty weird, but then maybe that could mean that Asir actually got with the sea god, who really was contract with Zagred, and because she's using devil power, this is why they see her as a sea god, or sea goddess, which could tie her into Megicula, and which is our part 2 of the theory, is that Zagred and Megicula were working together, and there's a lot of evidence for that. Do you have any final thoughts?
Without spoiling the next video, I don't have much, but yeah, I feel like this next video too is going to definitely make the readers kind of reread this with new and fresh eyes, because there's a lot to be unpacked within almost every panel, almost every interaction, especially in just before the Elf Arc. There's a whole lot of information. So my suggestion to you guys is definitely try rereading it yourselves with the points that we presented before that next video comes out, because I guarantee you guys will find more things that you'll be like, I didn't really look at it like this. Let me reread it again.
Yeah, it's pretty nutty, so I'm excited for that. And hope you guys are excited for that, and don't forget to like this video, and also go check out Jack's channel, be linked in the description below, and help him get to a subscriber goal, and check out his theories. He's got a lot of really good ones, And a lot of it comes directly from these books that he's buying and then extrapolating that into Black Clover and finding these really good theories. He's even predicted some things. I believe you were the first to predict that the first two devils coming out would be Lilith and Nama.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That was a wild ride. But yeah, comes from a lot from these books, and but yeah, I guarantee it's the channel is not for most people, I will say. So unless you're looking for like super in-depth knowledge on stuff, whether theories come true or not, then definitely check it out. You would like it. If you're just looking for like power scaling stuff, I'm unfortunately not that guy. So while I am looking for, to get to my sub goal, I definitely want to make it so that it's something that everyone that chooses to enjoys it.
So, are you ready to check out the channel? Plus,